Hello, everybody. My name is Lisa Lamont, and I am host of Ladies Get Your Prance On. And today I have a very, very special guest in the house. It's Dr. Chris McLaine, who is a chiropractor, and he is a wellness expert, and he's also a life and health coach. And so, Chris, welcome. Thank you for coming to the show today.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
I
It's great
am
to
I
be
am
here.
so excited. First of all, I found it very interesting when I was talking to you that you have not been a chiropractor for that long, and
No.
I'd also learned that you suffered a traumatic brain injury, which I don't want to go into any details about it, but if you could just highlight why did you choose to become a chiropractor later in life?
Well, it was actually, like you mentioned, it was kind of a result of the traumatic brain injury that I had during the process of becoming better again, becoming whole again. I encountered what most people might call the medical merry-go-round. And it was very frustrating to experience that. And you go, well, geez, we need a better system. We need a better system. And it just came about, well, I had an opportunity, almost like a second chance to reinvent myself. And what do I want to do in life? Well, I want to help people regain their lost health or maintain it if they still have it.
Absolutely. And one of the articles I saw that you post on your site was talking about a plant-based diet for people who have illness, and it said that between 75 and 80% of illnesses can be either maintained or cured. And why does a pharmaceutical company not want a cure?
Well, they don't want a cure because a cure prevents them from making lifetime customers out of selling you a medicine that they're going to convince you need for your whole life. So I think that really ultimately comes down to it. And ultimately, I think that they want people to have a little bit less power to make those decisions. And my role is to empower people, to let them know about the information and know where to find that information so that they can make a conscious decision on their own about what is the best way to go.
Well, I find it interesting on these commercials. They'll announce a new release, medicine,
Right.
and they'll have that voice, they'll be that pitch, and the side effects are stroke, heart attack, and even the people who take this medicine, there's only like a 20 to 40% chance that the medicine will work, yet they'll risk all these other side effects.
And through clinical trials and research trials, what we've seen is that when you measure a control group to a placebo group, the placebo group in most cases will get a 30 to 40% outcome. And
Yeah.
so what they're really saying is that if it's 30 to 40%, they really can't say that that's going to work for you or not. And they'll distract you. They will talk about all those side effects, but in the meantime, it's a little bee talking to you and, bzzz and everything. And I think that's really kind of a way of getting you just to believe in things. Oh, I saw it on the TV, so it must be good. And my doctor recommended it, so it must be the right thing for me.
Well, and the doctors, I don't know if they still do, but once upon a time they would get kickbacks from the pharmaceutical companies to use their medicine on their patients. Is that still true, or do you even know that?
I don't have any firsthand experience or knowledge
Yeah.
of that, but it seems to be very prevalent information out there that
Yeah.
doctors do get sort of, coaxed through the system in the medical system. They have
Yeah.
seminars, and they're basically pharmaceutical companies are making lifetime clients out of the doctors.
Yeah. When I worked at a law firm in Seattle, I had so many friends that were on antidepressants. I mean, it was like if you weren't on an antidepressant, there was something wrong with you. And then when you were on an antidepressant, I'm serious, they would go, well, what dosage? Like what, Paxil, Prozac,
Right.
and then what's your dosage? Like the person that was on the higher dosage, it was just like, wow, you have a more stressful job than I do. And I'm like, wow. And I did have something that I went through traumatic about, I want to say it's about 15 years ago. And so I was put on Paxil. And
Huh.
I wasn't told of side effects. I wasn't told of anything. And so when I got through my very personal stressful situation, the doctors never said, well, let's get you off of it. Like, you don't need that anymore because life is good. I'm feeling good. Let's get me off it. Well, are you having problems with it? Well, no. Well, let's just keep you on it. So for 10 years, Chris, I was
Sure.
on Paxil and I started reading, educate ourselves. And I
Exactly
started
that.
reading about Paxil, the side effects, and it said that when you decrease your dosage, I'm not telling anyone to do this. This is a personal, go through your doctor. But for me, I read about Paxil and it said for 2 to 3 weeks, because I was on a small dosage, only 20 milligrams. I was really at the smallest that they could do. But even to go down to 10%, I started getting these electric jolts.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah,
I
you have
told
to
my,
really, I'm
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no. And I told my friends I read the side effects could last for 2 to 3 weeks. And I told my friends I'm off the grid for 2 to 3 weeks. And, and I just cut down the dosage down to nothing in 3 weeks, and I will never go back. And I didn't realize, Chris, until I was off. I've been off of it now for 7 years,
Wow.
how was in a haze. Like,
Right.
I didn't react, but I didn't get upset, but I didn't get happy either. And I put a lot of weight on. So,
Interesting.
I just want to share for people. I'm not telling anyone to quit any medications. Definitely go through your doctor. But
Right.
I just want people to know that there are other alternatives that you can do that are plant-based. And
Oh,
so
there
can you
are.
talk a little bit about the benefits? And I didn't have you on here just to be a dietitian, even though you work with that. But there's a lot of women that follow the show that are doing diets, are doing
Right.
lap band surgery, they're doing medicine. Can you kind of talk about women's health and weight?
Sure. And I think, when you talk about women's health, the number one killer of women right now is heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
And, followed by breast cancer and strokes and other kinds of illnesses. So it's really something that most people really weren't aware of, that it was such a problem for women. But ultimately, women are not always given the proper choices when it comes down to, all right, I got a diagnosis of some type of a heart problem. um, you know, do you want to do some dietary changes, or do you want to just take some medicine? And most people are just more inclined to take a medicine. They don't
Yeah,
ask about the side effects like we talked about.
yeah.
And I have patients come in, and on my history form, one of the things that I ask them about is, well, how many medications are you taking? And people always ask me, so they say, well, my cardiologist said this and my cardiologist said that. And I've been living a plant-based lifestyle for over 30 years now. and
Wow.
and I respond sometimes to people, well, not to sound above and high and mighty, but you know what? I don't, honestly, the truth is, I don't have a cardiologist, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
a lot of it comes down to, what choices do you make? And many people are saying, they get really angry. They say, well, why didn't anybody ever tell me there was a choice to medications? If you look at the work of Dean Ornish, Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. John McDougall, Dr. Neil Barnard,
yeah.
all these doctors have had amazing success, and they have the research to back it up. So we're talking about a 94% reversal of coronary blockages within 2 years with nothing but a simple dietary change. And these are
Wow.
simple things that people can do. And in fact, Dr. McDougall did some interesting study using a plant-based diet in regards to multiple sclerosis, which is also another disease that really affects women more than men.
Yes.
And what they proved is that a plant-based diet can very much slow down the accumulation of lesions. It can slow down the frequency of onset of the situation that women go through with that.
Mhm.
But more importantly, what they found is that every doctor's always said, well, you can't put people on a plant-based diet because guess what? They won't follow it. And this research proved conclusively, which is amazing, that listen, over 80% of those participants were still following the plant-based diet at the 12-month mark. And so the fact is that when you get better and you feel healthy, you will be amazed at how well people will stick with something. And medications, like you said, you took the medication, it made you stay foggy and hazy, and you didn't
Yeah,
realize it until you were off it.
yeah,
But when you go from 0 to 50 and the way you feel, you lost weight, you have more energy, you sleep well, you have great poops,
yeah.
and all
So
those things happen.
I love it. And so here's what people talk about, because I've been in conversations with this. They're saying, well, you have to have your protein, you have to have your meats. We need protein.
Right.
So
Mhm.
can you address that? Because I hear that all the time. Like,
Absolutely.
I've got to have
Well,
my protein.
for sure. And for 30 years, I've been a vegetarian, and 28 of that, I've been a vegan. And I'm also gluten free because I have celiac disease. So It takes a lot of planning to stay healthy and eat the right foods. Um, sorry, can you respond? I got a little
Well,
bit
no,
off.
no, no, about protein, about
Protein.
why
Yeah, well,
people
that's
think they
the
need
most
the
common
meat.
question that
Yes.
people ask me as a vegetarian over
Yeah.
that period of time is, well, gosh, where do you get your protein from? And I'll just respond back and say, well, where does an elephant get their protein from? Where does a gorilla get their protein from? Have you seen a horse? Because all these are animals that are giant land animals that don't eat meat. And they have huge muscles, and they seem to be thriving pretty well without those foods. And so ultimately, what people need to know is that amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. And
Mm.
those can come from many different sources and not just animal protein. In fact, animal protein as a source of food is extremely inefficient. If you take about the law of thermodynamics in science, it's basically like taking a dollar bill and ripping away 90 cents of it to just focus on eating that 110%. The amount of water that it takes, the amount of land that it takes, the amount of coal burning that it takes, and gas burning that it takes to transport and produce all that food makes animal agriculture the number one most destructive force to the environment.
Wow. Thank you for talking about that, because I don't know if a lot of people know that the gas from cow manure is toxic.
Oh,
I mean,
the
it's
methane, right.
yes, yes, the
It's toxic
methane.
to the greenhouse. And so, we have factory farms with thousands and thousands of cows, and they're ruminant animals. So they eat the grass and they chew it and they chew it and they swallow it and they burp it up and they stink it out. And
Yeah,
all of that gas goes up, and it actually has an amazing effect on the quality of the atmosphere. So
yeah,
all the emissions it makes cows like, very bad. It's not just the methane that they're producing as well.
yeah.
One of the things that I really need to bring up about the animal agriculture is we're coming to a post-antibiotic era. And most people aren't even aware about that. They're like, what do you mean?
No.
And so what happens is that back about in the 1940s somewhere, the farmers discovered that if they were feeding these antibiotics to the livestock, not because the animals were sick, but because it caused a steroidal effect and made them grow faster and made them grow fatter. And so, we're talking about profit versus human health.
Yeah,
And ultimately, they have now, we talked about the pharmaceutical companies, overproducing drugs and having side effects for people, but most
yeah,
people aren't aware that over 80% of the antibiotics that are produced in this country are given directly to livestock. And here at the University of California at San Diego, the scientists involved in the Human Gut Project, Rob Knight, Larry Smar, these guys have determined with 100% repeatability that when you eat foods that have antibiotics in them, that crosses over into your own gut microbiome and
hmm,
causes damage. Go out in your garden in the backyard and pour some bleach all over it. Okay, because from your mouth to your rear end, you have a 30-foot digestive tube that is essentially the most diverse ecosystem on the planet. And when
yeah,
you eat those types of foods, it destroys that ecosystem. And 95% of serotonin, which is what makes people have to go on Prozac and stuff, because we find that, oh, they're not feeling good. So they must just be deficient in, it must be a Prozac deficiency or something,
yeah,
It's not antibiotics in the food or anything like that, or it's not the fat in the food. So we have a lot of myths out there. But what's happening now is that there's antibiotic resistance. So people are getting sick, and yes, doctors are prescribing antibiotics for viral infections, which is a waste. It won't do anything. But
yeah,
only about 8 to 10% of the antibiotics produced are actually being given to humans. So if we said, hey, we've got this 10% over here, and we need to have a big impact on antibiotic usage, or this 80 to 85% over here, which one do you think we should focus on more? And everybody's going to say, giving it to, well, wait a minute, why are they giving it to the animals? We didn't know about that. So now you have companies out there, and I won't mention any names, but there's some top restaurants out there that are making it a priority to start selling meats that don't have antibiotics in them. They're starting out with poultry, but it's just as prevalent in beef and it's just as prevalent in pork. So ultimately, how have we gone from an average age span in 1900 of 47 to today of being 78 or 79 for men and women respectively?
yeah.
because we stopped all people dying from the cold and the flu and pneumonia because we came up with the antibiotics and they were great,
Yeah.
but we overused them and we misused them in the animal world. And now we're going to be suffering. People are going to get sick and there's going to be nothing to do about it.
Well, I've heard that about the antibiotics, like people are going to be resistant to it, like
They already
because
are.
that's what I mean. And so they're wanting more dosage and
Right.
upping the dosage, and it's going to be immune. I didn't know that this is how the show was going to
I
go,
know
Chris.
it took a little
you,
turn, didn't it?
but I always go with the flow on this, and
Okay, good.
I think people's wellness, because
Mhm.
you are a chiropractor and you are in the San Diego area, and so we're gonna talk
Yeah.
about how people can find you, and you have these magic hands too. That when we were talking about, one of the jobs that you did when you had your traumatic brain injury,
Right.
you'd shared with me that you worked in selling birds.
Yes, I did.
And then you realized how your hands, because you have healing hands. That we were talking about that. It's not a coincidence that you ended up as a chiropractor with your hands. But can you share one of those stories that you had about the birds? Because I just find that so fascinating.
Sure. Well, I mean, when you have a traumatic brain injury, your whole life changes completely. And I was a small business owner at the time when it happened. And I went through a number of months being out of work and unable to work and going through care. And during the recovery process, it got to the point where, okay, now you can go back to work. And I had a few birds and I was in the bird store one day and they were hiring. And I just said, hey, this seems kind of cool. Can I work here? And they said, yeah, you can start tomorrow. And so anyway, I started working at the bird store, and pretty much right away I found that, like you said, I would just, people would say, well, I want to see that one. And I would reach into the cage and I would just grab the bird and it would sort of flop over on its back. And then I would take one hand, I'll show you. I would just take one hand and I would just kind of go like this. And then the bird would just lay there on its back with its legs straight up and it would just completely not move. And then I would go from like having it in my palm to opening my hands up. I would take it out of the cage and this bird would stay completely still. Just, it was like in some kind of a trance or something.
Yeah, you were
And
hypnotizing that
I
bird.
hypnotized them or something. And even some of the big birds that were scared of other people would always let me handle them. And so there
Yeah.
was something really amazing about just that connection. And I
Yeah,
think that,
I love that you shared that,
yeah,
because, and I would love to have you back at some point to talk about traumatic brain injury, because
yeah,
I had a horse fall. I got bucked off of a horse and I hit my head and I had 3 blood clots
wow.
in my head. And I don't remember, like 6 months, like people would talk to me and I didn't remember the conversation. I tried to go to work. I couldn't work. I mean, for 6 months, I could not work. I don't remember that period of time. And people don't understand, how incapacitated, and the brain is so complex. Some people might recover faster than others, but it just depends on the severity of it.
That's true. And one of the most positive things that I've learned through this whole experience and going back to school and getting dialed in with Dr. Carrick and the functional neurology program is that our brains are very plastic, and that
Yeah.
even though they've been damaged, they can be repaired, and you can almost like make bridges around bad areas and grow new neurons and make new things happen. And it's
Yeah.
amazing to me to see how fast that happens. And I have to say that there's something almost a little bit addictive about that. You get so like, you see just a light go off in people's eyes when things start clicking again. And I'm very fascinated by that process. And
Well,
it's
people
amazing.
don't. Our minds are so powerful. I one of my tools, one of my skills I have is I'm a registered hypnotherapist
Oh,
in the state
wow.
of Washington for the past 15 years, and I do work with chemotherapy.
Oh,
Um,
goodness.
Clients. I call them clients, they're not my patients. And it's amazing, after one session with their nausea and they're in a lot of pain and they have no appetite, like after 1 or 2 sessions, they're hungry, they have energy, they feel good. And I had one gentleman that had colon cancer,
Oh, wow.
and he had like four chemotherapy sessions. And so when he came to me, a lot of people come to hypnotherapy, we're the last, the last person, but we get the best results. And he just lay there and he just started crying when he was done with the session. And I said, he goes, get my wife. I said, oh my God, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I got his wife. He came in and he goes, oh my God. He goes, this is the first time where I haven't felt any pain.
Oh, wow.
And he just sat at me and goes, I feel so good. Our minds, I work with people who are terminal, who are, that only have weeks, months to live. And I'm able to create a hypnosis audio for them to go to a sanctuary, whether it's a beach or a private mountain, where they go so they don't need all this pain medication. They don't want their last days to be drugged and medicated. And so they'll use like medical marijuana along with my hypnosis, and they'll listen to them 2 or 3 times a day, and it works. And so our minds are so very powerful. And I got into hypnosis after my brain injury, which is interesting.
Great.
You became a chiropractor, so
Yeah. It's amazing how our lives can change, but it doesn't always have to be a traumatic event, but
yeah.
through those events, we transform.
Yep.
We really
Yep.
do. It's
They
amazing.
do. So you are in San Diego. So how can people reach out to you? Because there's a lot of followers that live in the San Diego area. So what is it? And are you taking on new patients?
I am taking on new patients.
Okay.
I have a really awesome practice down at Liberty Station in the basically it's Point Loma of San Diego, and there's a lot of really exciting things happening there. There's a sports club right next door to me that I'm kind of tied in with, so there's a lot of people involved in great healing that are working there. And you can reach me by phone, by email, and you can find more information about me on a couple of different websites that I have.
And what are one of those websites? And I'll attach that to the show too.
Okay, well, one of them is called Your Optimal Health Chiropractor.com.
Ooh, there we go. And I will make sure that's attached to the show, and people will be able to find you.
Great.
Chris, I cannot believe how fast time has gone. It has just been my pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I would love to have you come back at some point, because I really think it's important to talk about how our brains operate. And I'd like to go into a little bit more depth on that if you're up to that.
Absolutely. The brains, when they get injured, it can really affect how your gut works. And so I would like to really talk more about the microbiome and what people can do to garden their way back to optimal health.
Perfect. And do you also work with people who don't necessarily want to see a chiropractor but would like to talk to you about wellness? Do you meet with people for that too?
Because I'm also a health coach, and so it's important for people to sit down and talk with somebody about what their goals are and maybe what some of the challenges they faced in meeting those goals, and just get an alternative opinion. You don't have to get your back adjusted or get your neck cracked or anything like that. There's a lot of other things about chiropractic that I think people don't understand. It's way more about prevention than it is about fixing you once you get injured. So that's a really important message.
Oh, I love you. Well, thank you, Chris, for coming today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will be back next week. Until then, have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.